agencies and corporate bodies. So in terms of law, his competence is definitely not in doubt. But I want to talk about the person I know. He doesn't want to be called a prince. But Mr. Lateef Fagbemi is not just a prince of Ijago. He's a prince of Ife. Of recent, he lost his father, who was the king of Ijago, at a very ripe age of almost 110 years. And I'm very sure he will live to surpass that age because of his dominion. People die quickly out of anger. When you look at the nominee for today, you will never see any anger in him. He has a total control of himself. He has a total control of his environment. And he has been good to all of us. He has been good to all of us in our senatorial district. From what I know about him, he has invested more than 350 million in helping schools around our senatorial districts. He's a total family man, not just a micro family. The whole town is Alhaji Fagbemi's family. But I would not want to end by not asking a question, because there are so many things that are germane in the office is going to occupy. One, Alhaji Fagbemi is not a politician. In fact, in most cases, he wants to draw a distance from partisan politics. But I want to say, Mr. Senate President, I want to advise the nominee that the new position he's taking today as an index of politics. There will be interaction with the Senate. There will be supervision from Senate committee here. You must be able to enlarge your mind and be able to take them in. The essence of it is that we are all working to make Nigeria a better place. Mr. President, the other area we want to touch is area a little bit outside law, at the same time, still related to law. There are a lot of conflict, communal conflict, everywhere in Nigeria, especially on land matter. And particularly, it's so common within the Eastern Bloc, the Southern Nigeria, and Central Nigeria. I will want to mention a little bit. There were issues of Ife Modakeke, there are issues of Saragi Sare in our own domain, and there are issues of Ilu Obu and Ifan, even in town belonging to Chief of Army Staff. And equally, I want to mention too that in my own locality, the issue of Anerele. I want to ask you, how do we get a settlement without going to court or without brother and brother going to war? Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to Take my seat.
Thank you, Mr. President, and very distinguished senators. Mr. President, I earlier raised a point of order, Order 12, to enable or suspend rules to admit strangers into the Senate. At this point, Mr. President, my point of order is Order 12(1)(I). Order 12 sub 1(I). It's actually an invocation. I'm invoking this order to enable us admit. Thank you, sir. I have your permission to read, and I will read Order 12. Distinguished colleagues, Order 12, sub 1, Roman figure I. Oh, sorry. Order 12, 1 says, no person shall be admitted to the lobby or the floor of the Senate while in session, except the following and only by consent of the Senate. Specifically, I refer to Order I, former speakers and former deputy speakers of the House of Representatives. Mr. President, I move that we invoke this order to admit the immediate past Speaker of the Federal House of Representatives of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who currently is the Chief of Staff to the President and CNC, to deliver a very crucial correspondence from Mr. President. I so submit, I so move.
The Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to second the motion moved by Leader of the Senate. I so second, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, the Section 12 of our standing orders had already been invoked and is already in force, but specifically Section 12(I) that allows former speakers and former deputy speakers of the House of Representatives to approach the chambers while in session. So a motion to that effect has been moved and seconded by the Minority Leader. Those who are in support of the motion say aye. Those again say nay. The ayes have it. The former speaker may now approach the chair.
Yes. Kana nan za mu yi taking nasu gobe kenan.
Yes, Mr. Nominee, please resume. And we are through with the accolades. Can we now go into questions? The first question will come from the Chief Whip, after that Senator Baribe, and then we move like that.
My name is Senator Mohammed Ali Ndume, representing Borno South. Mr. Nominee, I have a very important personal question to you on the issue of Unexplained Wealth Act and the Unexplained Wealth Order. For the country to move forward, we all admit that we must fight corruption, and that is one of the main problems in this country. In fighting the corruption, the government put in place so many institutions, EFCC, ICPC, police, and all that. But you will agree with me as a lawyer that it has not been effective. The fundamental reason is because of the constitutional provision which states that an accused is assumed innocent until proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Here is the challenge. You have somebody that has unexplained wealth. You cannot prosecute him to prove beyond reasonable doubt. And I guess that is the wisdom why in even developed countries like UK, there is the Unexplained Wealth Order, which I believe as a senior advocate, you know. And you know that the fight against corruption in this country cannot get anywhere if the burden of proof is placed on the prosecutor. In those countries, there is the Unexplained Wealth Order or Unexplained Wealth Act. And its practice, I understand by my research, over 20 countries, including US and UK, whereby you are asked to explain where you got the money to buy what is not commensurate with their income. I hope that the Unexplained Wealth Act or Mr. President himself will issue an executive order on unexplained wealth. So my question, what is your position on that? As person that I know, religious, God-fearing, and also a patriot, and you are one of those that believes that corruption must be fought to a standstill in this country if we are to make progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sitting as the chair, I am Inea Baribe. I represent Abia South. Mr. Nominee, your name rings bells, and you have litigated very, I will say, landmark cases that has even made us change the law here. I'm referring to Amechi versus INEC. And you have been known specifically as an advocate of rule of law and a strong supporter of constitutional democracy. What would your option be, assuming we confirm you and the president appoints you to where we all think you should go as the chief law officer of the Federation? What will your option be if the government you serve desecrates the Constitution and does not obey court
orders. Thank you.
Off your mic. Is that a question? The question you are saying is if the government does what?
If the government does not obey court orders and the government desecrates the Constitution.
Well, I have a problem with the leading question. Are you trying to suggest that a government that believes so much in the rule of law will desecrate the Constitution? A government that swears to uphold the Constitution? So, because is anybody that can help Senator Abaribe to frame this question in a more respectable manner? Because this is preemptive. The government is not even up to 2 months old, and speculative, and you are saying if the government, previous governments that you saw, is what you should be talking about, not this government. This government is a corrective regime. And the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu is out to change Nigeria. And it's a government that believes in the rule of law. And you are saying if the government desecrates. So please, that language should not be allowed. Please, Senator Adero, I believe you can handle it better. Please reframe it for him.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. President, sitting in the chair, distinguished colleagues, our respected nominee. Let me start by, first of all, congratulating you for being nominated to serve as Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Let me also start with the question asked by my distinguished colleague, my neighbor, Senator Abaribe. This government believes in the rule of law. And disobedience to court order will not be tolerated in any way, in any form. And if you find yourself to be assigned to the Ministry of Justice as Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of the Federation, would you tolerate a situation where court order is being disobeyed? Secondly, this is my own personal question. There is serious prison congestion arising from judges not being enough to deal with cases, particularly at the higher court. It is very common to see a person being detained in prison for over 4 years for an offense that shouldn't take more than 6 months, even if he's convicted. Our prisons all over Nigeria are like that. What would you do to decongest our prisons if you are appointed as Minister of Justice? Thirdly, there is a clamor for removal of immunity, particularly for public officers like governors, deputy governors, president, and the vice president. We attempted removing it in the 9th Senate or in the 9th Assembly, but we couldn't succeed because we couldn't get enough support from the states. Would you subscribe to the view that immunity should be removed for public officers, particularly governors and president and vice president and deputy governors? Mr. President, I need your protection. I need your protection.
Distinguished colleagues, because of the number of hands, it will be good for us to restrict ourselves to one question, and so that others can have the opportunity to ask. And if there is any question you are not able to ask, please, the learned silk is available. Write it and pass it through the leader of the Senate. You will pass it to him, and we will still come back here to read it. Thank you, distinguished Senator Alero. Senator Alero, you enjoyed immunity for 8 years as a governor, and you did not complain about during your 8 years. You complained that you were enjoying immunity, and that when you were governor, the immunity should have been removed in order to allow your orderly to arrest you whenever there was a petition against you. Okay. Senator Nader, we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. Senator Nader.
Thank you, Mr. President. My learned colleagues, I'm Neda Imaswen, representing the good people of Edo South Senatorial District. Learned Silk, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. Looking through your resume, we attended law school the same year, 1985. I'm so proud to have you here as one of us. My question, the office of the Attorney General and the office of the Minister for Justice is woven in one. And I believe that there is a conflict of interest in that office as it is. If, by the grace of God, you are confirmed the Minister for Justice, will you support that office to be splitted into two so we can have the Minister for Justice and the Attorney General for the Federation separated so that they can perform their functions separately? Because as it is, their functions seems to conflict with the interest of the President and that of the people. What is your position on this, Leonard Silk? Thank you.
Distinguished Senator Dankwambu.
Your Excellency, the question I want to ask is similar to what he asked. I want to ask if it is right to separate the office of the Attorney General of the Federation and the Attorney General of the federal government, as is being initiated and is being asked all the time. Accountant General of the Federation, Accountant General of federal government, Attorney General of the Federation, Attorney General of the federal government. Is it right? Does it give the President enough powers to perform his role on the economy and the justice system? That's my submission, Your Excellency.
We should give the nominee the opportunity to be heard.
I am very grateful. I'm very grateful. Let me start from the question posed by distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar. And I start on a note of apology because I should have mentioned him as one of the senators from my state. Unfortunately, the impression I had was that he was not around. That said, let me talk about the question he raised. It's about the relationship between the National Assembly and the Office of the Attorney General. I don't see any difference between this question and the relationship amongst the three tiers of government. The government stands on the tripod: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And the French philosopher Montesquieu advocated the issue of separation of powers, rule of law, and others. But there is nowhere in the world where you have watertight separation of powers. It is the interest of the nation, the interest of the country that is paramount and will dictate how we relate, all for the good, betterment, and advancement of our nation. So, as Attorney General, if I find myself there, I cannot do without the National Assembly. I cannot do without the judiciary, but it has to be on certain defined parameters. That's one. Then my very good friend, Senator Sarafa Ali, I just want to thank you for the good things you said about me. Then my boss at home, and I say here, Senator Lola Ashiru, has asked that, well, because I'm not a politician, the Office of the Attorney General, with all respect, is supposed to maintain a modicum of independence. But that does not mean that you will not take into consideration the mood of the nation. So that is what is important, because it is the Constitution, it is the law that I am expected to guide and guard, again, all in the interest of the nation. About this issue of land dispute and all that, my answer is going to be a two-pronged approach. The first one is, it is either a dispute between one state and another, or between one local government and another. In fact, three. The third one is within the same local government, you can have dispute as to land. But I'm aware that we have boundary commission. Whether or not we'll achieve harmony in respect of land matters depends greatly, or a great deal, on our governors. Because very few instances of state clashes, interstate disputes arise. So it behoves the governor of a particular state to take the bull by the horn and not play politics with it. It's very important, because when election is coming, the issue is, oh, let me wait, otherwise I'm going to lose this election. So my advice is that it is the state governors that we turn to do the needful. At the local government, it is the local government chairman who should also take the bull by the horn. At the federal level, the president, the boundary commission, which is a body established or recognized by law, should swing into action. But my general advice is that it is better to nib these disputes in the bud as soon as you realize, or there is indication that's likely to be boundary dispute or communal dispute. I will advise the authorities to swing into action and not allow it to fester or get to such a magnitude that it will now be unmanageable. Now, in respect of the distinguished Senator Ndume, on explained wealth, I want to discuss this under a broad head of corruption. It is only in Nigeria that we want to take omelette without breaking egg. It's not possible. But we must also realize that the whole purpose of the society, of the nation, of the country, of the group, any group, is to promote economic development. In fact, if you have an enabling environment for for investment, you have little problem dealing with unemployment. But there cannot be this will not work unless you have an enabling environment in respect of legal, the legislation. Truth be told, we fight corruption, but at the same time, the way it is being fought in Nigeria leaves much to be desired. That is the truth. If I have my way, I will advise the president to unbundle. First of all, bring ICPC and EFCC together, unbundle them. Investigation should not be handled by the same body. There must be a supervisory authority within the same system. If there is investigation, it is another body. Prosecution is another body. It doesn't augur well to ask the same authority to, okay, do investigation, come and do prosecution. That is where we have problems. Then we are also not, let me say, patient enough. You know, investigation takes time, especially in serious corruption cases. Are we prepared to wait? My take is that a situation should be created, such as the one that happened in when Hush Puppy was arrested. They had been trailing him for years. He didn't know, and nobody will talk to him. But the day they said the time was up, he also knew that the time was up. Investigation should be thorough. It shouldn't be that when a given governor leaves office, you now say, yes, let's go. EFCC is inviting you. That is not the way to prosecute criminal matters, corruption matters. You can take your time to prosecute, but when you knock, and it should be like the way an average American will react when the FBI knocked at the door. You call your lawyer, yeah, it won't be to come and defend. It will be, please, this negotiation, there have to be a plea bargain and prepare to surrender so much. Because when they open the books, you yourself will be surprised. Is that what we have in Nigeria? I will answer it with an outstanding no, negative. So, if you are ready, and it will involve, with respect, the National Assembly, make laws that will be good for the society without anticipating, oh, will this one affect me? I'm sorry, it's just time to say the truth. We have to put in place very good laws to do this. Then, apart from the issue of having good laws, I've always insisted that it is better to have even bad laws administered by good men than to have good laws administered by bad men. It is important that we do this. So, but the issue of, hearing, distinguished, we have to obey the Constitution. There must be fair hearing. You cannot condemn a man unheard. It's never done anywhere. We cannot be in a hurry because, we cannot say because we want to prosecute, then you now brush aside the age-long with the one that has started even during the time of Adam and Eve. We all know what happened. But make sure that investigation is thorough. And when we talk of investigation being thorough, we pump money there. We have to pump money there. Unbundle the authorities, that has to be. Then, with respect on the issue of not obeying court orders, there is no government, especially the head, who will want to joke with the judiciary. It is those around him. In Nigeria, what we have, or which we have to pay attention to is interagency rivalry. You have the EFCC, you have the SSS, you have other security, organizations. I think, with respect, you will not find the president flouting any order, because the Attorney General will invariably be made a party. The mere fact that an order is made does not mean that you should obey it immediately. You think about it. Do I appeal? Do I, if I appeal, what do I do next? If I'm not appealing, what am I supposed to do? If I'm not appealing, of course, I cannot subject the order of court to any further test of validity. By Section 287, it has to be obeyed not only by the government, but every authority and presence in Nigeria. So the question of these, in the major areas where we have these disobedience of court order are between, with all respect, between these agencies. My advice would be that in matters of law, the Attorney General should be involved. DSS cannot be an island unto itself. EFCC cannot continue to, behave as if there is no law. There is law. And if you want to do investigation, you do investigation before inviting the accused person. It is not a question of inviting him and you say, we have caught a big fish. Then at the end of the day, you say you are investigating. So that also goes to the issue of the pace at which the cost of justice travels. It can be slow, but it's very sure. And I take example from what is happening in the United States. Trump has a 2024 appointment or date in court. Believe me, some people will say, 2024. No, that 2024, if God preserves our lives till and beyond that day, nothing will make them shift it, because thorough investigation would have been done. You do your investigation before arrest and not arrest before investigation. I'm grateful. Furthermore, now, see the
distinguished senators, you can notice renewed hope in our judicial processes. So I will want you to just answer one question from me, and then you can step aside. The question I want to ask, I know you will go. The question I want to ask is, where you have courts of coordinate jurisdiction, courts that have the same jurisdiction, let me explain it that way, and then they bring out divergent judgments on the same issue, conflicting judgments on the same matter. A court in Yola will give judgment in the Federal High Court in Yola on the same matter. Another one in Port Harcourt will give a different judgment on the same matter. Another one in Warri will give judgment on the same matter. Another one in Kano will give judgment on the same matter. If God gives you the office of the Attorney General of the Federation, how will it bring sanity to bear? Because it tends to make people to lose confidence in the judicial system. That's number one, because I think something should be done where there should be judicial precedence. If there is already a judgment on a particular matter, we don't see how, in fact, in some instances, we have seen where the High Court sets aside Supreme Court decisions. By virtue of their decisions, Supreme Court has decided something on a matter, And then somebody will go to High Court, and High Court will decide something totally different without looking at the precedent already set by the Supreme Court. Don't you think that, how will you, if you have the opportunity, work hard to bring discipline and sanity to bear? That's one question. The other one is, most of the boundary crises you refer to are not things that you can leave to state governments or local governments. Some of them are perennial problems that were caused by the creation of states and local governments. I know of some local governments in my state that are actually Igbo-speaking local governments. But during state creation, they were excised from Abia State. Some villages were excised from Abia State and put into Akwa Ibom. And then, I don't want to, and then when they come, they don't understand the language at all. In fact, they are clearly Igbo-speaking, and their traditional rulers hardly answer to the traditional institution in Akwa Ibom, but the villages are in Akwa Ibom. Then you go to another area, in the local government area, close to Abia. Is it Abia too? Abia too. You have some villages in Akwa Ibom that were cut out of in the local government and placed in Aljus or Carlos, in Bende or something, in the next local government. So those village heads are confused whether to attend traditional institution in India. So that kind of boundary situation created from state creation, they exist in various parts of the country. Those things are very difficult unless you revisit the boundaries, the state creation act itself. You understand? So it's not something that one state governor can do. But as an Attorney General, what will be your advice? But you have more problems if we were to take you. We can't finish you in one day. Because, to be very honest, we would like continuous interaction with you, even after the appointment, assuming you become the Attorney General of the Federation, because the issues are legion. Just proceed, answer to just those two issues, where judges of coordinate jurisdictions give divergent put their judgment on the same matter. What will you advise? And then, of course, perennial crisis of boundary disputes caused as a result of state creation and not the fault of the states themselves. What would you do in those two regards? Bearing in mind that some of these states were created in 1967 and they have been existing, and we have had attorney generals. So don't say that state governors should have. It means that they have failed, and this is your turn. What will you do differently?
Thank you, sir. I'll crave your indulgence to start from the second one, the second question on the issue of a boundary dispute. I will say that this is not a legal matter. Rather, it is a political matter. I know that a number of factors influence the creation of states, local government, and all that. The chief among them are, one, the willingness of this community to live together, then socio-cultural togetherness. So if a wrong has been committed, I think it can be corrected by legislation. Yes. You can amend the Constitution if it is the Constitution. After all, you have amended about 4 or 5 times. This one we can collate where those things are, ask those people, where do you want to be? Where they are going? Will you accept them? Are you ready to accept them? I don't think there is. As far as I'm concerned with respect, it's not a legal matter. Or if it is if law is involved, I would say it's a political legal matter. You make up your mind as to what you do and fashion the Constitution along that line. One. Number two, in respect of conflicting judgment or decisions, it is unfortunate. We cannot close our eyes or deny that these exist. But I know that as far as the courts are concerned, they have been making efforts to, nip this in the bud. For instance, if you approach the Federal High Court today or High Court of Federal Capital Territory, you are to sign a document saying, I have not, filed any other actions, even similar to this, anywhere. If you, otherwise, your case will be struck out, will be dismissed. But this forum shopping, I know is still there. 3 people are involved. 1, the judge, 2, the lawyer, and the litigant. But you discover that most of the cases are political cases. They are political cases. Very few are non-political cases. On the part of the lawyers involved, I know that the long arm of the law, through the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee, the body of benchers, will catch up with them if appropriate reports are made or they are brought to the attention of these authorities. For the litigants, well, there's very little we can do, but they can also be sanctioned. I will advise that, 1, we make full disclosure when we are approaching the lawyer to file a case. Because the lawyer is not a wizard, he's not a witch. He won't know whether any judgment, any action had been commenced elsewhere. But by and large, I think we need proper reporting system of court judgments, especially where you have Federal High Court. We can, I think that can be sorted out, bringing it to the attention of the judge where it is known. It is not only here. For instance, there was a matter, well, let me avoid, because it's one of the matters that are sub judice. We know that it happens, it's occurring. How do we do it? Everybody has to call in more ourselves to order. For the lawyers, I have mentioned that the power of discipline of the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee will catch up. The judge can also make recommendation towards the discipline of the judge. They are also of the lawyer. Then for the judge, the NJC will issue its power of discipline. But what we discover is that when this type of case comes up, the man who reported will now come when it is time to hear the matter and say that he's withdrawing his action. And if a man says he's withdrawing his complaint, there is very little remain for anybody to do in the circumstances. So these are my takes on the issue, sir. But for the Attorney General, his interaction with the National Assembly, with the judiciary is continuous. He has to answer as often as is needed, and on a humorous note, at no charge.
Well, you are used to giving advice without charges. So, let me thank the nominee, the Leonard Silk, Latif Vagbemi, SAN, for the elucidating answers to most of the questions, and then to also let you know that so many hands are still up waiting for you, but we can't keep you beyond this period now. So our intention will be that we will collect some of the concerns of the distinguished senators, and then the Senate leader will definitely present them to you, so that if God gives you the office of the Attorney General of the Federation, then you will also use those questions as working documents. Thank you for coming. You may now take leave of the Senate. The Senate is still in session, so our guests can leave quietly. Please. The Senate should leave. Who? Senator Buhari? Is it Abdul Fattah Buhari? Please, Senator Abdul Fattah Buhari, come back to your seat. You can go and visit the Leonard Still Khartoum. Next nominee, please. Distinguished colleagues, before us is Professor Ali Pate. Prof, you were long awaited. We've seen your resume, so we'd like you to give us a summarized version of your resume and add anything that you think you would like the Nigerian public and this hallowed chamber to know about you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Your Excellency, the President of the Senate, Your Excellency, the Deputy Senate President, leadership of the Senate, distinguished senators in these hallowed chambers, if I may call out my own distinguished senators from Bauchi State, my brothers, distinguished Senator Shehu Buba, Senator Abdul Ningi, and Senator Dr. Samaila Kaila, Ketel and Katagum. Good afternoon. It is with all humility that I stand before you this afternoon as a nominee to be minister in the Federal Executive Council. My name is Muhammad Ali Pate, and I was born on September 6th, 1968. I'm very grateful that His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, graciously invited me and nominated me to be considered by this chamber for confirmation. It's a high honor that I'll be forever grateful to him for. I come from the village of Plenary in Misau local government area of Bauchi State. I attended my primary school at the Bakaro Primary School in Bauchi local government. And 73 to 79, I went on to Barea College, Zaria from 1979 to 1984 for my secondary education. In 1984, I went to Ahmadu Bello University to do my advanced levels and then went on to medical school. I graduated from Ahmadu Bello University with my medical doctor degrees in 1990. After housemanship and National Youth Service, I went back to the Ahmadu Bello University Teaching Hospital as an assistant lecturer. I was very honored to have been recruited to work for the British Medical Research Council laboratories in the Gambia, where I started my international health career in February 1993. So it's 30 years now in international public health career. With the Medical Research Council, we did work on malaria, on malnutrition, on many other childhood diseases in those days. I went on to the United States to specialize in internal medicine and subsequently subspecialized in infectious diseases and was board certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine and Infectious Diseases as a physician who was also licensed in the United States. I studied health systems and pivoted to the World Bank as a development professional in 2000. At the World Bank, as a young professional at the World Bank and public health specialist, I worked in Eastern and Southern Africa on health reforms, HIV/AIDS, several countries in the region. I also worked in the District of Columbia in their own health reforms in the United States, seconded by the World Bank. I moved on to be senior health specialist and human development sector coordinator in the East Asia and Pacific region of the World Bank, where I was responsible for Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, Solomon Islands, and many Pacific Island countries, based in Sydney, but covering the region. In 2008, I was acting sector manager for health and nutrition and population in the East Asia Pacific when the late President Umar Musa Yar'Adua, God bless his soul, invited me to come home and serve. I did not hesitate to come back and serve. I came on to be the chief executive of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. And that was the beginning of a 5-year journey in the federal government. After 3 years, I was asked by His Excellency President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan to serve in his government, which I did. And in the 5 years that I served in government, we contributed, along with several faces that I see here and outside in this country, important things for this country. Polio was a major challenge globally, and Nigeria was at the heart of it. With all of you, with several other state governors, we were able to deal with decisively. We improved immunization. We developed a midwifery service scheme, developed a community health worker program, started to revitalize primary health care. And President Jonathan asked me to be his nominee as the Minister of State in the Federal Ministry of Health. And this hallowed chambers confirmed me in July of 2011. I served until 2013 when I completed all that I had promised my president at that time and moved on to teach comparative health systems at the Duke University Global Health Institute in Durham, North Carolina in 2013. I did that for 2 years until I became the Chief Executive Officer of Big Win Philanthropy, which is a UK and US-based philanthropy that was helping leaders in the continent of Africa who were interested in investing in human capital, who were interested in investing for the long-term growth of their countries. Following that stint of work, in July 2019, I was honored that the Harvard University assessed me and endowed a chair, the Julio Frank Chair Professorship in the Practice of Public Health Leadership in Boston, and took the unprecedented step of seconding me to serve as the Global Director for Health, Nutrition, and Population at the World Bank. I was Director of the Global Financing Facility through the period of the initial stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we contributed to several countries. Most recently, I was elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and in fact, I was due to start my role as Chief Executive Officer of the Global Alliance for Vaccines Initiative in Geneva, Switzerland, tomorrow, August 3rd. His Excellency, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I think has inspired this country. I think there's an opportunity to renew hope, to heal the country, to unite it, and to inspire it. When asked to come and contribute in my own country, I accepted, and I'm very grateful that you are giving me this privilege of standing before you. As a person, I've been married for the last 28 years to a wonderful woman who has been very tolerant of me, and we have 6 children, 4 girls and 2 boys. And community that I come from has been very gracious in naming me the Chigari of Misau, which is my traditional title in my own village, and the Enya of Ibi in Taraba State, in addition to other community leadership roles that I have had. I've also supported an organization that is a grassroots-based organization in this country for the last 8 years. It's operating in 19 states and the Federal Capital Territory, and it works with frontline community leaders. We've got 70,000 of them that have been trained through this organization that I have been supporting over time. So, Your Excellency, Mr. President, I'm here humbly standing before you and ready to answer any questions that may be raised by members of this chamber. Thank you very much.
Distinguished Senator Abdul Dingi, on behalf of the good people of Bauchi State.
Mr. President, my name is Abdul Ningi, and I represent Bauchi Central, Bauchi State, and the nominee is my constituent. Mr. President, I have known the nominee all his life. I school in Misau, where he comes from, and his father was actually the reason why I studied in ABU Zaria. And his uncle, Wakila Audu, is a very close associate of myself. Mr. President, here you have one of our very best, not only in Bauchi State, but in Nigeria. This is standing before you, it's a global personality. We used to call him the star of our time. You have listened to him, and you have also perused through some of his resume. And Mr. President, let me, from the onset again, congratulate him and thank in abundance President Bola Tinubu for appointing people like him. Being a global player, he's not taking away from our nation. Rather, he's bringing in, just as he brought in a lot of goodies when he was the Minister of Health. Mr. President, you recall, as soon as the Senate read out the list of ministerial appointees, and if you have been watching the social media and the electronic media, from Arise to TVC to NTA to AIT to channels, every participant that comes before this channel names him as a minister to watch out for. That is because of his pedigree. I have no doubt Professor Pate has come to add value to our nation. Mr. President, even though you say I should speak for Bauchi, I will crave the indulgence of my colleagues and, of course, the leave of the Senate President to allow my two colleagues to say a word or two, particularly Dr. Kachala, who happens also to be a medical personnel and also served under the professor. Distinguished senators, here you have a brother, somebody that can be relied upon to deliver democratic dividends, most especially in health. We are backward, but his dream all the time is to see that Nigeria belongs to the Community of Nations that will one day serve all our health requirements here, not to travel outside. I'm sure with Professor Pate given the opportunity in the next 4 years, you begin to see Nigerians look inwards rather than outwards for the health requirement. Gentlemen, Professor Ali Fateh for you. Thank you.
Dr. Kachala.
Mr. President, my name is Dr. Samaila Dahua Kaila. Kachallan Katagum is my title. I'm a medical doctor, as my brother said. Actually, I'm a newcomer to the legislature. And when I came, I actually promised myself that I am going to at least stay for 2 or 3 months without saying anything in this chamber, just learning. But of course, until if the president called me to do so. Thank God he didn't. But today I have to break my silence and at least talk about Professor Fateh. To be honest, in fact, I am in this chamber thanks to Professor Fateh. I was working in Kano when Professor Fateh called me and he said he wanted to talk to me. I said, okay. He now advised me to join politics. I was shocked because at that time I actually dreaded politics. But he said, no, join politics and you'll be a good politician. This is about 6 years ago, and a lot has happened. The rest is history. Today, I'm a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and Professor Fateh is here standing to be confirmed by one of his boys. The only thing I can say, I thank God. What my brother Abdul Lingi didn't say about Professor Fateh is the fact that he's not only a technocrat, he is a grassroots politician. It is very difficult to have this type of combination. But go to Bauchi State, call 3 politicians. Dr. Fateh will be one of them. So he is not only a technocrat, he is a politician. I'm not going to talk about him because his resume is here. It's very, very intimidating, especially for us, the medical doctors. But I will only say, for those of us that are going to work with him, interact with him, engage with him for the next 4 years, hopefully, this gentleman is very honest, but he is very, 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 let me call it, thorough, and I put the word here, very passionate about whatever he is doing. So if you are talking to him, whatever he told you, he meant it. He will not tell you what he doesn't mean. I will also crave the indulgence of my colleagues to ask him as many questions as possible, but on health. I'm not going to open the question like my colleague of Ondo said. Because of that, I have a question. I will open the floor with my first question. Before joining Senate, I was the Commissioner of Health in Bauchi State. And one of the things that I found is the heavy, let me call it, overdependence on donations and donors in our health systems, especially the immunization side. We heavily depend on donors. You remove World Health Organization, you remove USAID, you remove Dangote and Bill Belinda Gates Foundation, there will be no immunization in Nigeria. This is a fact. If given the opportunity to serve as Minister of Health, what are you going to do to transition Nigeria from a dependent on donor to a more domestic financing of our childhood immunizations. Bearing in mind that health does not even come under exclusive list of our legislation. In fact, it is not even in the concurrent list. I think it came, if I'm not mistaken, it came in the residual. So there will be a lot of conflict in enacting laws that will be universal or at least nationwide when it comes to health. How do you intend to navigate this confusion in order for us to be more dependent, more reliant on our economy, or more reliant on our local resources for vaccines, vaccination, and even vaccine production? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The dismissed Senator Issa Jibrin.
Your Excellency, the President of the Senate, my distinguished colleagues, I am Issa Jibrin, representing the very good people of Kogi East. First, I want to congratulate the Prof for this nomination, very well deserved. I'm happy that the Prof served under President Yaradua, because the issue that I want to bring up has to do with one of the projects that was initiated by the wife of the president then, but has since remained abandoned. The cancer project along the airport road, Abuja. I know you are very much aware of that project. You know the havoc that cancer has wreaked on so many families in Nigeria, especially within the women fold. Especially among the women fold. Okay? Yeah, among the women fold. So what I'm saying is this: why has that project been abandoned? That project, so many corporate bodies, including where I was working, as I was an executive director at AfriBank then, and we contributed 2 billion, okay, as part of our corporate social responsibilities to that project. We paid the money, okay, and that project has remained abandoned. I'm also happy that the minister for FCT then, well, just hold it, sir. Just hold it, sir. Hold it, sir. Hold it, sir. Your Excellency, can I continue, please? Hold on, sir. Hold on, sir. Hold on, sir. Yes, I know. The minister for FCT then is seated here. Okay, but what I'm saying is that my organization, my bank, contributed 2 billion to that project. That project has since been abandoned. I don't really know why it has been abandoned. The structures are on the ground. I understand that some of the equipment have been installed, but I want to find out why was the project, abandoned. Okay, that is my question. I'm not saying that he contributed to it, but I feel that that project is a worthwhile project, which was initiated by the wife of our late President Yaradua, a very good innovation, and we know the havoc that I said that cancer has wreaked on so many families in this country. Why has that project been abandoned?
Other words? Please read. Use your mic.
Order 55, the senator should confine himself to the issue relevant for discussion. Mr. President, Professor Ali Pati is not responsible for the building and equipping of the cancer center. It is a non-governmental organization spearheaded by the wife of late President Omar Musa Iradua. And I'm the chairman of the cancer center. And the center has been under construction. We have virtually completed the building. We are looking for money to equip it. So it is not abandoned. It's not abandoned. And this question should not be directed to the nominee. If you permit me,
I would want to ask relevant questions, particularly on the healthcare delivery in Nigeria. We all know, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, there is
Let me rule on your point.
okay. All right.
The point of order is sustained. Now, let me just say something. If we want to talk about healthcare now, I will also have a lot of questions. For instance, I have, under my tenure as the governor, built the best general hospital in West Africa. It is exceedingly fantastic. And I will expect that if given the opportunity as a minister, Prof, you visit Uyo to take a look at that hospital, and also see how we can turn it into a center where people can stop the capital flights in the health sector by going abroad, because we have the best equipment all over the place. Then I want to point out from your CV, between 2011 and 2013, you served as the Minister of State for Health. Am I right? And you couldn't have served as a Minister of Health for Health unless you were screened by the Senate and confirmed by the Senate. Your second journey is welcome. Answer the only question posed to you, and because your screening still stands, if there's anything you've learned new since you resigned as the Minister of Health, mention it to the Senate, and thereafter you take a bow.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, distinguished senators, for these questions. I think this country is blessed, and its future can be bright. The health of its people is one of the most important things for that future to be realized in terms of where we ought to be and where we are today. Unfortunately, there's a gap, and to bridge that gap requires a consensus among all of us, leadership of the President and the Executive, and also the legislature, as well as the subnational units. Now, the question that Dr. Kaila asked is a very important one. How do we manifest the prioritization of health of our people except through the resources that we allocate to it? Financing is the core of it. There's the governance side, there's the financing side. That's how we communicate whether we prioritize it. God forbid, if something were to happen in this for one of us, myself or anyone else, God forbid it, there are conditions that could happen that before we get to where we can get the help, we will be in very serious conditions. So the prioritization of health in Nigeria has been suboptimal. And I'll explain why that is the case and answer Dr. Kaila's question. The total government expenditure on health is about $12 to $14 per person, with huge variation. Out-of-pocket spending is huge portion of the total health expenditure, about $54 per person. So in Nigeria, much of the spending on health is from families and out of pocket. And government puts $12 to $14 per person, which is roughly, if you add it up, about 1% of GDP. How does it compare to other places? Niger, our next door neighbors, have less resources than us, but they allocate more than double what we allocate in terms of their health spending relative to their GDP. That is indication of the prioritization. Same thing with a country like Ghana. Ghana similarly does that. The point that I'm trying to make is that domestic financing represents the prioritization that we give to health, but we are not spending enough, perhaps because the revenue is limited, But even within the limited revenue, there is room to increase the allocation for health. The domestic financing that Dr. Kyla mentioned. Without doing it, inadvertently, we are outsourcing the prioritization of health to external actors. So it's important that we work, not only the federal government, Ministry of Finance, Planning, Health, but also the subnational level and the legislature that appropriates these resources to safeguard the financing of essential things like vaccines. We're having outbreaks of diphtheria, measles, many communicable diseases are entirely preventable, and they can be prevented by simple vaccines that are very cheap, $1 to $2 a dose. It's unfortunate that parts of this country have some of the worst immunization coverages in the world. And immunization is one of the most effective tools of public health. So, Mr. President, I'm pleading that going forward under the renewal agenda of His Excellency, Mr. President, that we prioritize investments in health and investments in the things that can prevent diseases, that can protect our children who are the future of this country. The domestic manufacturing, if I can say, Mr. President. Yes. Yes, yeah, I will. I would say the second point is there's a scope for medical industrialization in this country that we have not attended to. 60 to 70% of our generics, the drugs that we take, are imported from countries that are just like us. There's an economic value chain in that health sector that we have not optimized. Same thing with our devices. Same thing on service delivery. So the health sector is not only a sector that we spend, but there's an economic development agenda that is inherent in health. In addition to the imperative for health security. So putting all those together, the consensus should be to prioritize health and to translate that prioritization in better investments through the budget process. Mr. President, I also have noted the questions on the infrastructure, and I think that's something that we can look at in due course. The question here before me is how do we prevent doctors moving from Nigeria to other countries? That's a very complicated question. I left this country in 1993. Why did I leave? Has it translated into better value than if I had stayed here? I think we produce health workers, we produce doctors and all kinds of professionals. We need to look at the conditions of service, the circumstances, the compensation, and in a way, re-energize the sector around the mission, because no one joins the health sector who is not committed to serving his or her patients. I think we need to renew that compact within the context of health to make it more conducive to retain the health workers that we produce, to deploy them effectively, to train them where needed, and to give them the tools where they can work with those tools to serve our people. That's going to be very important. And I would say the incessant labor disputes within the health sector that sometimes affect service delivery itself is something that can help, if resolved through building of trust between the government and the various professional groups, to reduce the tendency for folks to travel out of the country to other places. For those who travel, there are opportunities also to come back. I'm hoping, Mr. President, that with this move that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has done of convening Nigerians of all stripes to join the team that he's assembled, that will restore confidence and give hope that even folks that are outside the country will consider coming back to see how they can contribute. I made that choice with my eyes very wide open, but this is our country. So for those who have left, I will say next to service to God is service to country. So if the opportunity comes, even those who have left should find ways to contribute, and this country's health system will get better. On Gavi, how can Nigeria benefit more from Gavi and vaccine production? So Gavi, which is the entity that I would have served from tomorrow, is the largest global fund for health. It has $27 billion in terms of the fund it's raised, but also donations. It's based in Geneva, Switzerland, and over the last few years, it's invested at least $1 billion in Nigeria's health. For much of the vaccines that are provided in Nigeria, it is contributing and subsidizing the cost of the vaccines, just as it has for many other countries in the world, and during COVID supported 142 countries. That is the organization that I would have started as CEO tomorrow. Now, the production of vaccines is something that a country ought to decide. India is the pharmacy capital of the world. It didn't happen by accident. Indian government, Indian entrepreneurs, technology scientists, regulatory scientists came together and made that possible. We have a population of 240 million. If we start on the path of medical industrialization and say simple things like generics, 7 we create jobs, we return our foreign. If we start on that path and build our regulatory capacity based on what entities like NAFDAC are doing, it is very possible that we can move fast in the arena of other biologicals. Vaccines are one. There are countries in the continent that are planning to produce vaccines, Rwanda, Senegal. They are producing vaccines. If we don't act, it's to produce to sell to us. And we can go beyond the vaccines that are already in place, the cheaper vaccines, and go towards more advanced vaccines like cancer vaccines. Those are arenas that we can look forward, given the size of our economy, given the resources that God has imbued this country, and the leadership of our president, to see how we can invest on that path so that we will be more secure in the supplies that we get for our health and get the economic dividend from that investment. Mr. President, I will answer the question on cancer a bit from another angle. The infrastructural bit, cancer, we lose about 600,000 people from non-communicable diseases. We talk about infectious diseases, which are vaccine preventable. There are many other diseases that are non-communicable. Cancers are one of them, hypertension, diabetes, stroke, and others. Now, there are vaccines that can prevent some types of cancer. The hepatitis B vaccine. The hepatitis vaccines can prevent cancer. In effect, they prevent an infection that can cause cancer. The human papillomavirus vaccine for adults and girls prevents a viral infection that can lead to cancer, cervical cancer in women. And we have a large burden of cervical cancer, particularly in this country, and our women bear the brunt of it. Dealing with cancer, there's a preventive side, in addition to screening, but also the vaccination. There is a vaccine which is available in most other countries. And thankfully, in the next few months, Nigeria will get ready. We'll have the human papillomavirus vaccine, and Gavi is supporting that in this country. It's my hope that the consensus, including with the legislature, would educate our population to understand the value of preventing a disease before it happens, a disease that is lethal, like cervical cancer, and that once it's available, it's subsidized, that in fact it can be, just like several other vaccines. But in the future, with the technology of vaccine production, the mRNA vaccines, cancer vaccines will become a reality. And I am pleased to say, Mr. President, that we're confident that under the leadership of the President, Nigeria will be a hub for health, not only for our country, but also on the continent. Because what happens here has ramifications. We can supply our neighbors. We can supply rest of the continent as well. So the time is getting there when development, at least in health, we need to own it. We should be responsible for the health of our people. We should invest in that direction, and we should not outsource it, because the more we outsource it to donors from outside with grant financing, they can then influence our priorities. But the more we invest with our domestic resources, then we can control the priorities that fit with our people. And if we stick to the idea that government is about service and the people are the reason why government exists, then prioritizing the health of the population is going to be one of the most important things that we should all be doing. Because as it is, we have one of the lowest life expectancies. We have 2.4% of the world's population, almost a quarter of global maternal mortality, a fifth of child mortality, and the largest number of unimmunized children in the world. This is not a statistic that is hidden, it's out there, and we have what it takes to use what we have and spend it better and make sure that, in fact, we address this most basic thing to prevent diseases that can be prevented and to produce health. And there will be benefit because the trust of the population will be enhanced if the minimum they are able to get something that could help them. The human capital of this country can be preserved because health is not only a byproduct of development, it can be a consequence of development. If you have a healthy population, they will be more productive. And if you are more productive, you can invest more in health. And there's an economic imperative. Of course, there's the political dividend that Mr. President has also alluded to. So I would, Mr. President, stop here and happy to answer any additional question there may be. There's one question of preparedness. I think it's a very important one.
On the mic for you.
The question is on preparedness against outbreaks. And I think it's a very important one. Health security is part of national security. And let me explain. I was leading the World Bank's global practice on health when COVID hit. We saw a small virus came from Wuhan, affected just a tiny fraction of the world's population, an infectious disease, but it grounded the world's economy. Every country was affected, even those who were not infected. So from a health issue, you have an economic catastrophe that many countries are still struggling to recover. We had seen that with Ebola. So there's a direct linkage between health security and economic security and national security. But how do we prepare? And in the era of risks, climate, flooding, displacements, conflicts, migration, how do we prepare? We are not as prepared. And there's a lesson that we should learn from the last couple of years, that when the chips are down, the world will take care of itself, and we have to take care of ourselves. So preparedness includes strengthening our public health institutions, the Centers for Disease Control, other entities in the federal government, our laboratory infrastructure, our frontline health workers to be trained and ready, the trust between us and our people. Because when there's a crisis and you say, put a mask, if they don't believe you, they won't put a mask. You say, take this medicine, they won't believe you. So building that foundation of trust is also important, and that's what we do as part of preparedness. In addition to the more technical aspects of organizing ourselves to know that, are we ready when something starts? Do we have simulations, exercises that we can do to test where are the gaps, what have we learned? Strategic national stockpiles. When I was at the World Bank and pandemic hit, we put $6 billion on the table for countries. Your Excellency, many African countries reached out and said, how can we get test kits? How can we get ventilators? To my shock, the market stopped functioning. Cost of masks escalated. Ventilators were not available. Some big countries restricted access to their ventilators, and the market dysfunctioned. Even though we put money, but the money, we will buy ventilators for a country and they will say it will be delivered in 6 months, and people are dying. Oxygen was not available. So there are strategic national stockpiles. Countries have them. How good is our strategic national stockpile? How do we construct it? When a disaster happens, it's not when it happens, like Dr. Tedros of WHO says, you don't build a roof when it's raining. You build that roof before it starts to rain. So most countries have those strategic stockpiles. How do we build that as part of our effort to deal with outbreaks? Because pandemics don't occur in isolation. They start from a small outbreak, they expand to an epidemic, and if not controlled, they go to a pandemic. God forbid, if there's an influenza pandemic, fast spreading infectious disease, more lethal than COVID, are we ready? Those are important, very sobering questions that I know countries are asking themselves. And we ought to ask ourselves, and it's not only the executive, but the legislature and also the subnational units. It's also the professional groups, civil society, to ensure that as a country, as a matter of our own security, our own human security, we are prepared. So, Mr. President, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Well, they're very distinguished colleagues. I'm sure you enjoyed the lecture. We actually invited him to answer questions, but he ended up lecturing. But Prof, I just want to put on record that I worked with you in my state when I was a governor, and we were able to stop the further spread of polio. And my state was among the first states that you declared polio-free in the country, under my leadership as governor, and under your advice and tutelage. I believe it is the view of the Senate that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu should be commended for going outside the shores of the country to bring back our country's best, to join in the renewed hope for all Nigerians. Is that the view of the Senate? Yes. That this nominee, who we believe strongly will add value to this country's governance, should take leave of this Senate by taking a bow down. Those in support say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prof, thank you for coming. Distinguished colleagues, just the last nominee for today, and then we revert to plenary shortly. So be patient with me. Distinguished colleagues, the nominee before us is Dr. Doris Anita Uzoko from Imo State. Doctor, you're welcome to the hallowed chambers of the Nigerian Senate, and congratulations on your nomination by Mr. President. We have your resume, but if you have any other thing you want to add to the resume, or you want to do a summarized version of your resume for Nigerians to know you, who are not opportune to have this resume in front of them, you can use the next few minutes to do so. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Senate President. Thank you, the Deputy Senate President. Thank you, Senate President. Thank you, Deputy Senate President and principal senators here, as well as the distinguished senators here. Thank you for welcoming me into this hallowed chamber. I'm here as a ministerial nominee representing Imo State, who's been nominated by His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I would like to use some time to introduce myself properly to you. But before I proceed, I would like to first give thanks to Almighty God for bringing me thus far. I would also like to thank my community for their support for training me, and I would like to thank all those who have played a role in mentoring me so far. So I want to thank my governor, Senator Hope Uzodimma. I want to thank Jimovia, chairman of Zenith Bank, and the entire management of Zenith Bank for their mentoring and their tutelage so far. My name is Dr. Doris Uzoka Anite. I would like to repeat my name because I know I've heard so many versions of my name. It's Doris, spelled with one R, Nkiruka, Uzoka, with a hyphen, Anite. I come from Osuobodo, Uguta local government area of Imo State. I had my early childhood in Osuobodo, Imo State. And then we left to Lagos State, where I completed my primary school. I also had my secondary education in Lagos State, and finally went to the University of Benin, where I obtained my Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery. I'm a medical doctor. Shortly afterwards, after graduation, I served as a houseman in a co-hospital, Lagos State. Then I also did my youth service in Lagos State under redeployment from Ebonyi State. I served in Barowa Primary Health Center in Lagos State, Surulere local government. Afterwards, I did a short medical service at Providence Hospital before pivoting my career into banking. I started and ended my banking career in Zenith Bank. My first appointment in Zenith Bank was to set up the Zenith Philanthropy and External Relations Department. I was an assistant banking officer. The responsibilities I held then as an assistant banking officer who was setting up the Zenith Philanthropy Department was to establish, my mic is on, but, okay. Can you hear me now? It's better? Thank you. I set up the Zenith Philanthropy and External Relations Department as an assistant banking officer. My responsibility was to establish the corporate social responsibility of the bank and to set a course for the bank's philanthropic activities and its corporate social responsibility. Some of those things that we did still stand to record, one of them being the construction or reconstruction of the Ajose Adeogun street, which still stands as one of the best streets. And still being used till tomorrow as one of, for the youth parade, Christmas youth parade, and as well as the Christmas lighting. And it still stands as an icon till today. Due to my performance in my various responsibilities, I got triple promotions, double promotions. Eventually, I headed the Human Resources Department and the Training Department of Zenith Bank, actually 8 years after I joined the bank. And that was actually a phenomenal success or record. As head of Human Resources, I was responsible for translating the strategic objectives of the bank into execution. And then I was asked to ensure that we quadrupled the profitability of the bank. And then I identified that human resources was the best or the most valuable asset any company could have, or any nation. So using my recruitment skills, because I first headed the recruitment department, we identified and identified very qualified personnel, hired them, trained them, equipped them with the skills they needed, and deployed them to areas where their skills met their competencies. And we can see the growth translate into the profitability of Zenith Bank today. Under my watch, we grew Zenith Bank from 80 branches to 400 branches. And we also quadrupled the performance of the bank in its balance sheet size. Afterwards, I was redeployed to Treasury Department. I started my career in Treasury Department as a bond trader, head of bonds trading. Then I moved on to currency trading. Then afterwards, I became the head trader for the bank. And I set up the Zenith Sales Department, as well as the Financial Institutions Department. Shortly afterwards, I was promoted to become the group head of Treasury. As a group head of Treasury, I was responsible for the balance sheet management of the bank. I was responsible for balance sheet management of the bank across all its subsidiaries, and this also included its foreign currency liability and assets and liability. I also was responsible for the revenue growth of the bank, and under me, we recorded year-on-year growth of over 36%. I was also the chief investment officer of the bank. And most of the investment, you can see some of the activities or my contribution to the growth of the bank. I work with a team of highly qualified individuals, some of whom also benefited from my own direct tutelage and mentorship. While working as a general manager and the group head of Treasury of Zenith Bank, I was identified and spotted by my current governor, who actually reached out to the bank to request for my redeployment to Imo State to work as his commissioner for finance. Following his request, I was redeployed, or rather, I was allowed to go to serve, a service I consider as one of the most important service of my own lifetime, the service to humanity. And when I got to Imo State then was just starting to experience the height of insecurity. It was a very difficult environment, but I sat down with my governor and we determined its economic development plan. And then we sat down, and Imo State, being a transit state, is actually in the center of the southeastern bloc. And we have a lot of traffic going through that state to other states. And so it was very central to the economic activities and the commercial activities of that region. So we identified that construction of road was one of the most important things that we needed to do. And I can tell you, then with very sparse resources, we decided to, we went on to construct to today over 37 roads. And then apart from that, as a coordinating commissioner for the state as well, I undertook a lot of responsibilities, including strategic financial management, where I prioritized economic development, certain activities that was going to turn around the economy of the state. Infrastructural growth and development. I focused on industry and trade, A lot of those things are my accomplishments are in my CV. I'm already getting signals to round up. At this point, I would like to just talk about briefly what I do currently. Though I still am the Commissioner of Finance for Imo State, I've worked in several committees in this present government, starting with the Policy Advisory Council, where we developed and formulated a roadmap for the current administration, to the Presidential Strategy Team, where we came up with strategies to mitigate or to cushion the effect of the first subsidy removal, to the Presidential Food Security Council, where I currently work as the Secretary, developing the food security strategies for the country, as well as the Presidential Economic Team, where we're working currently to solve the FX crisis in the country. That's in summary what I have done. Thank you, distinguished senators.
Thank you. Let me now yield the floor to Senator Asukwa Ekpeyon.
Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Asukwa Ekpeyon, Senator representing Cross River South. Dr. Doris is a person that is known to me. She served as Commissioner of Finance for Imo State while I was her counterpart for Cross River State for several years. Beyond that, we served on the Presidential Campaign Council for our party and on the Policy Advisory Council after our president-elect was declared. She's someone who has a lot of resources, deeply intelligent, and extremely hardworking. I know her capacity, and I implore you that she is here to be screened, here to answer your questions, and I'd like to start by asking her a question myself. Dr. Doris, based on your CV, based on the work that I am privy to that you have been doing on the Policy Advisory Council, I see that if you are cleared here, you may be ending up, or your trajectory is towards trade and investment. I would like to ask questions in that area. Today, one of the issues bedeviling the micro, small, medium enterprise in this country is the lack of adequately priced capital in the sector for them to grow. I'd like to ask a lack of adequately priced capital. I'd like to ask what your intentions are if you were in such a ministry as trade and investment to stimulate the growth of that sector. Also, there are issues of multiplicity of agencies intervening in that sector. How do you intend to eliminate that duplication and streamline the interventions from agencies such as SMEDAN, Bank of Industry, Nexim, NEPC, etc.? Thank you very much.
Senator Ndubweze.
Thank you, Mr. President, sitting as chair. Fellow distinguished senators, my name is Engineer Ndubweze Patrick C., representing Imo North from Imo State. Mr. President, the person standing before us, Commissioner for Finance and Coordinating Economy in Imo State, supervising 12 ministries. The person standing before us,
Commissioner for 12 ministries.
Coordinating commissioner is enough. So, you can see quite an intellectual. You can see a medical doctor who vied into banking industry. In a short while, she became a general manager and a group treasurer of such a big bank like Zenith Bank. So dedicated,
that I know that we would like to ask her some questions because she is somebody who is always ready to discharge. But I don't think that we'll even belabor ourselves so much because she is use point of order, because she is somebody without any doubt. We can believe that with her, whether we put her in the Ministry of Finance, she will do well. Whether you put her in the Ministry of Health, she will be wonderful. Whether you put her in the Ministry of Trade and Industry, she will be excellent. I think she's an exceptional nominee, and she will be exceptional minister. In fact, she will be an uncommon minister. So I would suggest that those who are itching to ask questions, just be brief so that she can just... Those who must ask questions, be brief. Let her bow and take a leave. I'm pleading to all of you, my friend. I'm pleading to all of you. You know, when you have the best, you don't need to belabor the best. She's excellent. I thank you all for listening, and maybe allow my colleague from Imo State, Ostis Naso, to add his verse. And I have another brother there, Onyewuchi, but the truth is that we don't need to bother her with questions. She's wonderful.
Well, to be honest, Senator Patrick Ndubweze has taken over the job of the presiding officer. After speaking, he also nominated the next person to speak. So I don't intend to disobey you. Therefore, I concur. The distinguished Senator Izunaso, you have been nominated to speak.
Mr. President, sitting as chair, my distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Osita Izunaso from Imo West. Mr. Chair, the nominee before us, Dr. Mrs. Doris Uzoka Anietem, is one of our best and brightest in the banking and finance sector, spanning over 2 decades. Mr. President, this multi-talented, cross-functional, managerial, with heavy managerial ability, has a lot of experience in both IT, treasury, human resource management, etc., etc. Mr. President, we can attest to the fact that since she came to Imo State as the Commissioner for Finance and Coordinating the Economy, the Imo State IGR have moved from point A to point B, and Imo lives are very happy with that. Mr. President, I do not think that we are going to overlabor her this afternoon with plenty of questions, because we all know that she's very capable. If you look at her resume, she's extremely capable. And I can look at the time, it's past 5. And yesterday, we had a tradition of allowing the last woman that came yesterday to take a leave. And today, Mr. President, sitting as chair, I will request my distinguished colleagues that we allow her to take a leave of the Senate. Having worked very hard for this country, having worked very hard in the banking sector, I believe that any ministry she finds herself, she will do a thorough and a very good job. I rest my case, Mr. President.
Thank you. Distinguished Senator Ezenwa.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Ezenwa Onyewuchi, and I represent Imo East Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me first of all congratulate the nominee before us, Dr. Doris Uzoka, and to say she is a nominee in whom we are well pleased. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the nominee before us is an astute professional with rich pedigree and impressive resume. This is somebody that started her career as a medical practitioner and moved from there to the banking sector, where she excelled and got to the zenith of her career at the Zenith Bank. The lady before us, in pursuit of her passion, has also come to serve as commissioner for finance and coordinating economy in my home state of Imo State. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I do not have any doubt. I do not have any doubt, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, that the nominee before us will be an asset to this administration. I have no doubt whatsoever, Mr. President, that this nominee will add value. I therefore want my colleagues, and I urge you to give her expeditious confirmation to take up her responsibility in the Federal Executive Council. I so submit, Mr. President.
The distinguished Senator Kinkibe.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, first and foremost, I'd like to congratulate the nominee. And to my colleagues, I want to say it is clear from her CV that we're looking at a very special woman, a woman who is well accomplished, a decision of excellence by His Excellency, the President of Nigeria, for picking people of her caliber who can make a difference to Nigeria. And so I'm trying to tell my colleagues also that there's no need to labor her. I'm sure that if we let her, she will be answering questions for the next 2 hours. But I know that as us senators, we do not want to be here for the next 2 hours. Since it is quite unnecessary, I think we should also let her take a bow and go, as we have done to all the other men and women of caliber that we have seen here in the last couple of days. Thank you.
Distinguished Senator Orwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join others, just like Senator Kingibe just pointed out. The lady standing before us, Dr. Anete, is from her CV, is an accomplished person, both in terms of intellectual acquisition and performance, practical, both in banks, medicine, and other functions that she has been asked to perform. So for me, I want to join others to say that we allow her, greet us, and go, so that we can look at other matters. She has done her matter by herself for her performance and her past achievements. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senator Dr. Zhang.
Your Excellency, the Senate President, distinguished colleagues,
I am Dr. Titus Zam. I represent the good people of Benue Northwest Senatorial District. Mr. President, I have reason to ask a little question. From the nominee's resume, she is trained as a medical doctor. And people who have chosen medicine from experience are people that have passion for medical care. How come that this nominee has abandoned the medical profession to the banking sector? Thank you.
This is the last question you are going to ask. This is the last question you ask.
Distinguished distinguished colleagues, that question is very relevant. That question is very relevant. And Dr. Zam, I would like to know that having spent over 6 years studying medicine, what made her to abandon medicine, to go into, I'm sure she will be very happy to answer the question. Distinguished Senator Idiot, you have anything to ask? Because we have to be gender sensitive.
Yes, Your Excellency. The Senate President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Idiat Oluroti Adebule. I represent the good people of Lagos West. Yes, the consensus is that you should take a leave of the Senate. But then, looking at your CV, and knowing fully well within me that you have the capacity and the capability and the competence to answer any question whatsoever in your area of study and your profession, I'm going to throw this question to you, knowing fully well you will do justice to it. Peradventure, you are confirmed and you are assigned the Ministry of Trade and Investment. I would like to know, and I'd like you to take note of the fact that on the ease of doing business scale in Nigeria between 2011 to 2019, Nigeria is 131 of the 100 countries that signed up today to the ranking. May I ask you, if you have the opportunity, what strategy are you going to adopt to improve, to make Nigeria to improve on the ease of doing business ranking in the world? In Africa, we're 20, and I believe we can do better. Ghana is first in the ranking in the scale, but I think and I believe we can do better if we have somebody that is dedicated and ready to improve on what we have presently. Thank you. Never mind, don't mind.
Thank you, distinguished Senator Idiot. Just before we give an opportunity to the nominee to, distinguished Senator Plan, is there any question different from what has been asked?
Something, sir. I have something, sir. Can I? Is it granted? Okay. The President of the Senate, distinguished colleagues, I am Senator D.K. Plan, Senator representing Plateau Central Senatorial District. I join my colleagues to congratulate our nominee, and I also join them in appreciating her performances. My little question to her is, although people are saying, suppose you end up with trade and investment, I want to ask that even if you ended up there, for the fact that your background is also in medicine, I hope you will avail yourself to advise any other person handling any ministry, despite the fact that you are specified to a particular ministry, because I see content in you. Secondly, sometimes back, the Primary Healthcare Development Center also, agency, awarded 774 primary healthcare centers in all the 774 local government councils. All the projects, particularly the one in my place, there's one in Pushit, there's one in Kadung, all have reached a stage but abandoned. And I think it has economic implication. I pray that as a member, when you are cleared as a member of the cabinet, the relevant ministry should be advised to ensure that these primary health care centers are brought to completion. I hope you'll advise. I wasn't having a chance now. I wasn't giving chance. I wasn't giving chance, eh? Okay, let's see.
Senator Karimi, are you still interested in point of order? No. Okay, my question, finally, is that she's going to answer everything we have asked her, but I don't think my CV is complete. My own paper, maybe because some pages are missing. I haven't seen anything about her family life. I didn't see anything about, I haven't seen anything about her family life, the name of her father, the mother, and the community. I've seen that she's from Oguta, but Oguta is maybe a local government. I'd like you to break it down so I know your family life and the name of your husband, and how many children and the rest of them, please. Yes. So go ahead.
Thank you, distinguished senators. Let me start by the last question, or with the last question. Okay, permit me to start with the question.
We had agreed before we started, and we are keeping to it.
Okay, so I was born to Mr. and Mrs. Uzoka. My grandfather's name is Ogene. Ogene means a title in Uguta. Ogene John Nnana Uzoka. And my mom is Mrs. Victoria Uzoka, and Osobodo in Uguta 2. Osobodo Uguta 2 in Uguta local government area. I have a lot of children actually, and a lot of them are both biological and non-biological. And I'm responsible for a whole community of people both children, men and women. And I still feel very honored and happy to be of service to the community. I don't know if you want any other about my biography. Okay. Okay, so let me start with okay. I think also the question about why I left medicine or why I switched from medicine. The question about why I switched from medicine is also related to my biography. Actually, for me, while I was a medical doctor, I did a lot of things. I did surgery, which requires a lot of precision and clarity about what you were doing, diagnosing diseases, profiling solutions, and also profiling, okay, the important ones. The remaining, okay, I think I will answer the primary health care one. I also agree with the distinguished senator that a lot of those projects have been abandoned. For example, in Imo State, we had to carry out the renovation of 305 primary health centers in the 305 wards. I was instrumental to that. I actually was the chairman that drove that renovation. And I agree with you, if I have the opportunity to contribute to the primary healthcare development agency, I would do that. Then the remaining two questions were around trade and investment. Thank you, distinguished colleagues, for suggesting a ministry. To date, I don't really know where I'm going, but permit me to say that if I had the opportunity to be in trade and investment, the first question referred to pricing of factors of production, and the second question was about making it easy for businesses to operate in the country. I agree that the country currently has this difficulty, or a difficult business terrain. I saw that in banking, I saw that while I was a commissioner. A lot of these factors are actually within the responsibility of us here, the state government and the federal government. It's not just the responsibility of the Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment. I know that the Office of the Vice President is driving the ease of doing business, which is driving the ease of doing business agenda, a project that's being sponsored by the World Bank. And this is to make trading or businesses to facilitate easy business environment for businesses. There's a whole lot that can be done in easy businesses, and I think that will just dovetail into why the factors of production are very expensive. One, you look at land. If we improve the land reform of each state, because the businesses are within the states, the economy of this country is within the states, and that's the responsibility of the state governors. There should be a deliberate attempt to improve land reform, and most especially automate the process of owning land, owning property, landed properties, and using it for businesses. Currently, we know that if you buy land today and you're waiting for your CFO, it takes a long time. That has to be done. Secondly, the tax reform has to be done. I mean, a lot of governments should also, while the federal government is going on the tax reform and harmonizing taxes or multiplicity of taxes, I think the state governments also need to replicate the same. Then you come to provision of infrastructure, which is largely a responsibility of both the federal and the state government. While the state government is responsible for a lot of the infrastructure, the state need to also be deliberate about providing the right infrastructure to support their MSMEs within those states. Then people, we have to have deliberate effort, make a deliberate effort to have skilled people, skilled manpower in the right jobs, including improving our quality of education from primary to secondary to tertiary education, technical education. Okay, I'll round up very soon. To financing. Financing is actually the last thing. When you get your business processes right, financing is the last thing. And I think that a lot of intervention or financing intervention that can be provided to MSMEs to improve or to lessen the cost of doing business for them. When all of these are done, okay, so I believe that if we're able to get it right, we will see. Okay, thank you, distinguished senators. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, the nominee, you will agree with me, has vast experience in various areas. In the area of medicine, in the area of financing, in the area of human capital development, in the area of management, or in fact governance. Senator Patrick Ndubueze had pointed out that she was not only a commissioner in Imo State, that she was also supervising 12 other ministries, which makes it very clear that she is very vast she's very experienced in governance. So we must commend the President for the choices that have appeared here today, because they are not only well educated, they are also well experienced in various fields. I believe that those who suggested trade and investment for you, maybe are just thinking in their minds that they would like to see you there to promote trade and investment in Nigeria. But it is the work and the job of the President to allocate portfolios to his ministers. So don't go home thinking that you are going to trade and investment. Just believe that Mr. President will give you where he best thinks that you will contribute your quota most, for the benefit of Nigerians. Is it the view of the Senate that this nominee should now take leave of the Senate? Those who are in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. You may now take leave of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the Senate revert back to plenary so that the chair can report progress. I so move.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to second the motion by leader of the Senate that the Senate do reverse to plenary so that the uncommon chair can report progress. I so second.
The motion has been moved by the Senate leader and seconded by the uncommon minority leader that this Senate do revert to plenary for the chair to report progress. Those who are in support of this motion say aye. Those who are against say nay. The ayes have it. The Senate, in the Committee of the Whole, resume consideration of the request of Mr. President and Commander-in-Chief for the confirmation of nominees for appointments as ministers of the Federal Government of Nigeria. The following nominees answered questions from distinguished senators on a number of topical issues. Mr. Dele Alake from Ekiti State, Mr. Muhammad Idris from Niger State, Mr. Latif Fagbemi San from Kwara State, Professor Ali Pate from Bauchi State, and Dr. Doris Anite Uzoka from Imo State. Thereafter, the Senate deferred approvals and confirmations to another legislative date. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Just very special announcement. We have a correspondence from the Commander-in-Chief and President of the country. This is to the distinguished Senate President on behalf of distinguished senators. Requests for confirmation of ministerial nominees. These are further what we're waiting for, the completion. In compliance with the provisions of Section 147, subsection 2 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 as amended, and further to my earlier correspondence dated 27th day of July, 2023, I am pleased to forward to you the underlisted 19 ministerial nominees for confirmation by the Senate. 19. Ahmed Tijani Kwazo, Bosun Tijani, Dr. Miriam Shetty, Dr. Isiak Salako, Dr. Tunji Alauza, Dr. Yusuf Tango Sununu, His Excellency Adeboyeka Oyetola, His Excellency Atiku Bakudu, His Excellency Bello Matawele, His Excellency Ibrahim Gaidam, His Excellency Simon Bako Lalong, Lola Ade John, Prince Shuaibu Abubakar Audu, Professor Tahir Maman, Senator Aliu Sabi Abdullahi, Senator Al-Khali Ahmed Said, Senator Henekin Lukbobri, Oba Maigari Amadu, Zevania Gisalo. Whilst I hope that the aforementioned nominees will receive the expeditious consideration and confirmation of the Senate, please accept, distinguished Senate President and distinguished senators, the assurances of my highest regards. Yours sincerely. This is signed by Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President, Commander-in-Chief, Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Distinguished senators, having exhausted the items on the other paper, and in view of the nominees that we have just received, to enable us give them time tomorrow for them to go through their code of conduct and other papers before appearing before us. This Senate is hereby adjourned to Friday, the 4th day of August, 2023 at 11 a.m. prompt.